Hey everyone, this is just a quick reminder that thanks to YouTube's broken copyright system, the video you're about to watch has limited solo clips. If you want to watch this whole series as I want it to be seen, with full solo clips that really breathe, you can check it out at Nebula. And seeing as this is going to be my last video for who knows how long, I really just wanted to say thank you one more time. You guys are amazing. Your support means the world to me. Okay. Enjoy the show. You can trace half a century of cultural history through monumental live guitar solos in front of crowds of thousands. But in the digital age, everything changed. The solos that rocked this new era weren't played on enormous stages in front of thirsty crowds. They weren't laid down by generational talents on iconic instruments. Instead, they took place in basements across the world, played by a million unknown teenagers on overpriced plastic controllers. The guitar solo's biggest cultural moment of the internet age came at the behest of Guitar Hero. The first Guitar Hero transformed the gaming world when it hit the scene in 2005. By 2007, the series' third installment, Legends of Rock, sold 1.4 million copies in the US in its first week. By conservative estimates, the game has gone on to ship more than 10 million units in the US. That's twice as many sales as the best-selling rock album of 2007, Linkin Park's Minutes to Midnight. Guitar Hero was nothing short of a cultural phenomenon, letting a generation of teens play out rockstar fantasies that had been put in their heads by generations of guitar gods. But while gamers across the world were slipping into virtual worlds, the guitar solo itself was slipping out of cultural relevance. Legends of Rock continued a trend of guitar culture riding on the laurels of its past, rather than adapting to the music of a new era. Through the 21st century, this trend would see the guitar fade out of the mainstream, even as some of the most technically talented players ever to live were in the heights of their career. For a long time, the guitar solo would be missing and presumed dead. But finally, at the start of the 2020s, the first hints of a new era of guitar relevance have started to rise from the ashes of the past. Guitar Hero 3 introduced a new generation to dozens of the great guitar tracks of old, and even featured cameos by two of the biggest guitarists working in the era, Tom Morello and Slash. Morello and Slash were leading the guitar charge in the 2000s, alongside other legacy acts from the 80s and 90s. Both had split with their original groups and joined into new supergroups. Slash cut one of the best solos of his career in 2005 with Velvet Revolver's Slither. That same year, Tom Morello flexed and did Tom Morello things on Audioslave's Man or Animal. Many of the best guitarists working in the 2000s had solos on Guitar Hero 3. Muse's space western guitar epic Knights of Sidonia was a high point of Guitar Hero 3, showing off Matt Bellamy's wicked, fuzz-filled prog sound. John Frusciante's Suck My Kiss solo was featured in Guitar Hero 3, but by the mid-2000s, Frusciante had pushed his sound far beyond that early work. Wet Sand is a monumental piece of guitar work, a slow-building ballad that erupts into a cathartic finale. The most infamous solo on Guitar Hero 3 came on the game's most challenging song, Through the Fire and Flames by Dragon Force. Herman Li shreds through that song at a breakneck tempo that approaches the speed of light, running up and down the neck, filling his music with wild blips, beeps, whammies, and a veritable smorgasbord of pedal effects. In the 80s, Herman Li's absurd shred style would have had legions of guitar nerds bowing at his feet. But by the 2000s, this sort of technical excellence could be found all over metal. Where Eddie Van Halen had once played with his back to the crowd to hide his techniques, every song being recorded was now tabbed out in detail and made accessible to anybody with an internet connection. The rise of streaming video birthed online tutorials that made it easier and easier for people to figure out how to play these techniques. As a result, the technical feats of years past began to lose some of their unique prestige. An artist could drop a new solo, and a month later, there would be an online video of a 12-year-old playing it note for note. This didn't make the solos any less impressive technically, but it stripped them of some of their mystique. Still, some guitarists found ways to stand out in this changing scene. John Petrucci continued to establish himself as a talent to aspire to. Petrucci was more than capable of tearing out fast guitar solos filled with runs, key changes, time changes, and general absurdity. But his most impressive solos of the era, like the climactic finish to Octavarium, relied on a more melodic, emotional approach, heavily influenced by David Gilmour. As metal continued to spiral into absurd complexity, the simple approach of punk rock was having its last moment in the sun, thanks to the surging pop-punk movement. Sum 41's Dave Baksh brought hard rock into his pop-punk sound at the beginning of the decade, highlighted by solos like the Hell Song. My Chemical Romance's Ray Toro continued a legacy started by Brian May and Randy Rhoads, mixing it with a punk aesthetic to become an emo icon for a new generation of millennial teens. But even pop-punk's moment in the sun was fleeting, and really, the guitar players weren't the stars of that movement. The guitarist who might have had the most mainstream success through the 2000s was John Mayer. Mayer became a star at the start of the decade for his radio-friendly rock sound, but in the middle of the decade he turned away from that for a return to his blues roots. This style of playing is epitomized by his lush solo on Slow Dancing in a Burning Room. Alongside Mayer, Jack White continued to keep the electric blues tradition going through the new millennium. The White Stripes' 2007 album, Icky Thump, is a guitar masterclass. Its title track has one of the best solos of Jack White's career, a strange piece combining his traditional blues sound with a more avant-garde electric shriek that seems to be influenced by Tom Morello. Jack White would continue to stand firm as the last great rock star well into the 2010s, even after the White Stripes broke up. As rock groups were disappearing, White was working with the Raconteurs and the Dead Weather to keep the tradition alive. Though he'd never again reach the mainstream heights of the White Stripes, Jack White kept himself in the conversation with a series of cult favorite solo albums. 2014's Lazaretto features the guitar instrumental Highball Stepper, a shining oasis of hard rock in the desert that was the 2010s. Even though the social media era brought all new avenues for musicians to reach audiences, few guitarists truly flourished. There's perhaps no better sign of the diminished role of guitar in the 2010s than the total lack of genuinely viral guitar videos. Every now and then, a talented savant would pop up and make the rounds on social media, but there was no lasting impact from these artists, even as the internet was vaulting rappers and pop stars into relevance. A lot of the rock in this era pivoted toward bigger ensemble outfits that cared less about guitar solos. One of the only musics in the modern era consistently including guitar solos in their songs was a genre that was seminal in creating the guitar solo in the first place: country. Country guitar had been steadfast ever since the days of Junior Bernard, jumping into the spotlight occasionally, but mostly remaining in its own self-contained world. One of the great kings of country guitar is Keith Urban, who has been infusing rock guitar into his country since the 90s. Most of the great guitarists of the 2010s are like Urban or Jack White, artists who began their career in the 90s and continued on the backs of already established fan bases. One of the few guitarists to enter the scene in this era and make a mark with her solos was Annie Clark, better known as St. Vincent. St. Vincent took elements of rock, electropop, and jazz to create a unique, avant-garde indie pop sound. She often used complex pedal effects that made her guitar sound closer to a synthesizer. St. Vincent's take on the guitar was a genuine breath of fresh air for the instrument. She stood out as a woman in a scene that had become heavily male-dominated, and brought a vision for the guitar that stretched far beyond the limitations of rock. Annie Clark even designed her own guitar for Ernie Ball. The smaller design and lighter weight of the St. Vincent guitar made it easier for women to take up, and its sharp aesthetics and crisp sound have seen it used by legends like Jack White and Tom Morello. St. Vincent is just one of a number of women who are starting to shine and bring in a new era for the guitar solo. In 2019, Brittany Howard, the frontwoman of Alabama Shakes, released her debut solo album, which includes a wicked blues solo on He Loves Me. On the technical side of things, Yvette Young is one of the leading guitarists in a growing movement of math rock, a hyper-technical genre defined by absurd time shifts and odd rhythms. Her playing on Covet's Aries is a technical wonder, but for all of its complexity, it retains a beautiful, dreamy air. Slowly but surely, after a decade of irrelevance, the guitar solo has started to peek its head into the cultural conversation once more. This slow renaissance of guitar is coming at the hands of communities who have been historically kept out of the scene. While women like Sister Rosetta Tharpe were foundational to the electric guitar, female players had all but been edged out by the 60s. In the modern age, that's finally changing. In addition to the women shaping conversation, the 2020s have seen international guitar artists break through in America. In recent years, the self-taught Japanese phenom Ichika Nito has become one of the first guitarists to truly leverage the internet into a career as a musician. Nito's guitar playing is ethereal and complex. He's developed a fandom with his miniature atmospheric sounds, perfectly fit for the shortened attention spans of the internet age. In 2021, the Western musical world was floored by the guitar playing of another international musician, Niger's Mdou Mokhtar. Mokhtar's psychedelic sound combines Tuareg guitar music with the electric blues of Jimi Hendrix. He's been playing for years, but it was his 2021 album, Afrique Victime, that truly launched him into the spotlight. The title track of that album is a raw song lamenting the damages that colonialism has done to his home continent. Many of the most monumental shifts happening to the electric guitar solo right now are coming from hip-hop. Rap and guitar have had a complicated history over the years. After the rap rock origins of the 80s and 90s, the two musics mostly parted ways. In the late 2000s, the rap visionary Lil Wayne tried to bring the two genres back together. This culminated with his 2010 album Rebirth, which opened on American Star. Lil Wayne's guitar playing was panned by critics and widely mocked by audiences. But for all the criticisms levied at Lil Wayne, he was doing something that few of his guitar contemporaries were doing at the time. American Star is genuinely innovative in its attempts to reconcile the worlds of hard rock and pop rap. The same year that Lil Wayne tried to bring the guitar solo into hip-hop, Kanye West had the same idea. He brought guitarist Mike Dean in to play a forlorn solo on Devil in a New Dress. Despite Kanye's success, guitar solos in hip-hop didn't catch on in the early 2010s. But in the latter half of the decade, some of the most celebrated acts in rap started to change up their sound with guitar solos. Tyler, the Creator, brought Austin Feinstein to play on 2017's Garden Shed. As the guitar finds its way back into hip-hop, most guitarists are using it as augmentation rather than a main focus. But that's not the case in all rap rock. In recent years, the profile of Gary Clark Jr. has continued to rise. His background is in blues guitar, but he's freshened up his sound by infusing his blues with hip-hop influences. That had him collecting Grammys in 2019 with This Land, a hip-hop blues song protesting America's history of systemic racism. One of the big cultural moments in this new era of guitar-based hip-hop came at the 2020 MTV EMAs. As the world sat at home in the middle of lockdown, Doja Cat debuted a heavy nu metal version of her hit Say So. That version culminated with a guitar solo that took heavy inspiration from math rock virtuoso Plini. Say So was one of the biggest pop hits of the year. Doja redoing it in nu metal style marked a clear shift in both the pop and hip-hop worlds. And that shift has continued to this day. This very year opened with Lil Yachty dropping a surprise psychedelic rock album. The opening track of Let's Start Here is The Black Seminole, a song heavily influenced by Pink Floyd, featuring a brilliant guitar solo. Doja Cat and Lil Yachty have both talked about how rock provided freedom for them. It let them escape the limitations and expectations of hip-hop. And they weren't the first to have that attitude. That echoes what Lil Wayne said about his forays into guitar at the beginning of the decade. As hip-hop has become the dominant sound of the music industry, its biggest stars have begun to feel boxed in by its sound. As a result, they're turning to one of the oldest, richest traditions in modern music and breathing new life into it in the process. Nearly a century ago, the electric guitar leapt forth from the Mississippi Delta. In the decades that followed, it would seize the music world by its throat. It became a raw medium for personal expression. It became an important way to speak truth to power. It became an exercise in competitive showmanship and innovation. It even became a riotous response to its own excesses. And while the guitar solo has fallen from its once mighty pedestal, a new generation is promising a bright future for the instrument. Across all walks of music, we can see new acts channeling the spirit of Jimi Hendrix once more. Whether it's the technical drive, the ear-splitting noise, the psychedelic soundscapes, or the radical messages of protest. The legacies of Jimi Hendrix, of Chuck Berry, of Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads, of Jack White and Tom Morello live on in nearly every solo played today. What the future will bring is anybody's guess, but the guitar solo is so intricately woven into the culture of popular music and into the political history of the world that its continued progression is almost an inevitability. Simply put, the guitar solo isn't dead. This very moment, a young guitarist is probably being inspired to pick up the instrument for the first time and setting themselves on a road toward taking the stage in front of thousands and shaking the world once more.